It's like history repeating itself all over. We're early on my next one. In communication studies, we teach the schemata and scripts, and the schemata is like the motherboard. It's how everything is connected, right? Everything's connected through little wires and little pieces of copper and all of that, if we're looking at a computer board. And then we all have a script as well. And the script is how we live our everyday life. Well, we're taught these things from early on. They comes from the stages of listening, how we hear our accents. You know, we're taught our accents, we're taught certain phrases, we're taught what's right and wrong, we're taught everything from the time we're little, right? From the time we're born. And even before then, we're hearing this stuff, even when we're in the womb. And so these are our individual game plans. There are accents, they're the phrases we use, there are behaviors, they're even our beliefs to some extent. Even after we've gotten older, we retain some of what we were enculturated with. And so this is how we live the rest of our lives, regardless of our spiritual program, that these are the motivators that continue to push us forward in life. And what we know now is that many of those scripts no longer serve us. We know that they're just simply basic survival skills, some of them. And as we get older and we learn new ways of behaving and new ways of expressing who we are, we don't rely on those basic scripts quite so much. But they're still there. They're still hanging out in our framework. They're a part of who we are. And they never go away. Just like everything we've ever heard in communication studies, we believe that we hear everything and it falls into our frame of reference, whether or not we actively remember it at any given time. It's always in the background, everything we hear. So think about everything you hear, from the news to the trees to the birds to the little chipmunks or the car that drove on the road or shuffling of paper. All of that falls into our frame of reference. And this is what causes us to have those deja vu moments, right? We go, oh, this feels familiar, it sounds familiar, it smells familiar, but that's only because it's in our frame of reference, and it triggers another memory. And so that's a little bit of what we're talking about today. There's this story that floats around, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, that you're standing somewhere and you're holding a cup of coffee and someone bumps into you and you spill your coffee everywhere. And the question is, why do you spill your coffee? And if you answer it's because someone bumped into you, that's the wrong answer. It's you spilled your coffee because that's what was in the cup. If it was tea, that's what would have spilled out. And the truth is that when we encounter the uninspected, when that happens to us, what is it that we release in the moment? What spills out of us? In Science of Mind, in the Science of Mind textbook actually, Ernest Holmes says that principle is not bound by precedent. He says that we can change that. And I've always thought I understood what he was saying. Principle is not bound by precedent, because just because things always seem to happen in a certain way doesn't mean they always have to happen or unfold in that way, that we can change that. And but somehow I forget that. I forget that principle is not bound by precedent. And I forget that that includes my individual personal experiences as well as the world at large. So here we are, we're moving along, things are good, the day is beautiful. Today it's a gorgeous morning out there. The sun is shining, or maybe the sun could be shining and there's a really light, soft, gentle rain. It's just one of those perfect days. The mornings are starting to get a little bit chilly, and you can see the slight turn of the color in the leaves. We can smell fall. It feels like fall. And things are moving along. Our friends are present and joyful. Our jobs, our avenues of creative expression are fulfilling and they're abundant. Our love interests and our relationships are moving along. The car runs smoothly. Our pets are healthy. Life is good. Life is really, really good. And then, no, not at that. You're praying, you're remeditating, we're reading books that continue to expand our awareness. We have those incredible discussions with our friends and our family that make us reach out and embrace life in a new way. The little things, politics, they're in the background, but they don't dominate our thought process on a constant basis. The loud music or the barking dogs don't seem to irritate us quite so much because life is good and we're on top of the world. And our co-workers' habits and constant talking, they can be a little time-consuming, but you breathe, you go on, because really they're generous, loving people, and we know that about them. We know that everyone is one, and everything's right, and these are very good times in our lives. And it's all about perfect. But then I'm reminded that sometimes that feels like a Twilight Zone episode. And I remember this Twilight Zone episode. I was really very young, and so I might have skewed it a little bit. But I remember that life was really good to these people in this small town. And everyone was basically happy, and no one wanted to leave. But they couldn't leave because their town was encased in a little bubble. And it was like this enclosure, it was like a snow globe. And so the snow globe, or their world, I believe, was controlled by a little girl giant, right? And you're nodding. Do you remember this episode? Okay. So anyway, when the little girl played with this village, this snow globe, the town would experience storms and devastation. And there would be periods of time when the globe would sit on a shelf, and then nothing bad would happen to the town. And the people would rebuild, and they would continue their lives, and it would be beautiful and sunny again. And you know, the days would continue, and they would have night and day because it was sitting on a shelf in front of a window. And so they would start all over. And the point is that these people had a script. They could only do what they knew to do, right? And so, which was to begin again, trapped by the bubble that surrounded them. Whatever the real story is, this is what I remember. Being trapped in a bubble, and the drama of daily life, always wondering and waiting for that storm to come. Always wondering if I could rebuild and what would happen next in this perfect little town of mine. And so I always wondered after that, like, what would happen if she dropped that little snowball and it fractured, right? And things started seeping out. What would have happened to those people in that little globe? And what happens to our lives when our globe, when our perfect world fractures a little bit, or there's a little hole in the armor that we wear every day? When that beautiful, perfect life that we have right now this morning, something happens to us unexpected. What spills out of us? That's the question. And so I think that we patch it up. I think here and there we plug the hole, we kind of stuff it all back inside, and we try to get back to this beautiful morning. And maybe we tape the crack, and then by talking about it with others, we put a little sticky piece over it, and that holds it for a while because we can relate and people support us. But we really don't discuss our fragility, about how really fragile we can be, even on these perfect mornings. Instead, we talk about the external condition, and we blame the person who bumps into us rather than what we're actually holding in our cup. So like a small wound, it doesn't quite heal. It never is quite repaired. But we just keep on a little more slowly, with a little bit less energy, maybe. We don't quite get enough sleep because this thing is in the back of our mind. Maybe we eat too much, or we don't eat enough. Our emotions run a little bit closer to the surface, a little bit closer to that fracture. And our tempers start to get a little bit more frayed. And it's like a wide spiral staircase that kind of goes down one step at a time. I feel myself, when it happens to me, I feel myself getting more and more cynical. I can feel sarcasm coming up from me about world events and how things are unfolding in the world at large. And then it starts getting closer. I might make a comment to or about a friend. I might start being very self-denigrating about myself, those kind of things. I'm a little less patient with my neighbor, my coworker, the neighbor's dog, those kind of things. And so we start asking ourselves, so what's going on? What's going on? It's hard to put a finger on it because our world and our lives were going so well just a couple of days ago, just even a couple of hours ago. So what did I do differently that caused this fracture to widen or the hole to get a little bit bigger? And my body is tired or they're a little more achy. We're getting older, and we wonder, is it something wrong with me? Should I take more vitamins? Do I need to get more exercise? Should I see a doctor? All these little fears start popping up that are part of our script, our schemata. And then things start happening. We get a flat tire, right? First it starts on this emotional level, and then things actually start happening in our world. We get a flat tire, maybe there's a minor car accident, some type of unwanted or unexpected expense pops up and puts a dent into our budget. We end up in a spat with our partner or a coworker, and things beginning to feel like they're spiraling out of control. This is what happens in our life. But because we're spiritual people, we don't like to dwell on these things because we know that our words have power. And so if we dwell on them and we focus on them, because we're strong, spiritually minded people, and we know that these things are true, we don't want to give it energy. We don't want to appear weak in our faith. And so we keep things a secret, which is no different than the secrets we kept as children, right? And it's that now you can see how the script starts resurfacing. We don't want to share who we really are. And so whatever the reason, we might not even be aware of the reason that these things are happening in the world because we can't control circumstances in the world. But we stand spiritually tall. We pull ourselves together. We pull out our Science of Mind or our Unity books, and we pray and we meditate, but we don't ask for help from others. We don't share what's really going on. Because again, we don't want to be seen as spiritually unfit or overly abundant or needy or weak, those things. And the truth is, we think we are not the main event, right? There's something else going on out here that's causing this in here. And so we focus on action and reaction. And we respond to unexpected events with familiar behavioral patterns based on our familiar fears. It's the script that reemerges. We have high expectations of ourselves. I believe that that is true, very high. And a huge attachment to outcomes, even though we say we don't. We do. And there's a sense of having power over what we perceive as negative in our world and in our immediate lives. And these thought patterns continue because we respond to them with a Band-Aid or with a muted reaction based on our spiritual practices. We don't dive into anything beneath that veneer that we've created for ourselves. That's, remember, fracturing just a little bit. So I'm beginning to think sometimes the more balanced I become, the more spiritually fit, the healthier I am, the more my life feels out of control. And it's kind of an interesting paradox to me. And yet I continue to attempt regaining a control that was never there in the first place. And so my life over the last month has had more large events happen to it that are so not connected to me, but affect me in ways that I would never have dreamed. I feel like I'm a bystander in my own life, almost. I'm standing over here watching me get censured at work for something that I have had not a participation in. And in my mind, right? Because I was following the rules. I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and then I was called out for it and eventually written up. And I didn't deny it. I was like, yes, I did do that. It's on my syllabus. And they're like, I still don't quite understand how the whole thing unfolded. So I'm over here and I'm like, okay. And I just signed the paper and I'm like, okay. I don't understand. And I was talking to the dean and he didn't understand either. We're both like, we don't understand. And so, okay. And then an extended relative of mine who lives in Asheville was severely attacked by a dog and has had amputation and is still in the hospital a month later, severely attacked. And how that affected me is this sense of like, that feeling of like, well, how do things happen to good people? Why do these things happen to good people? They're beyond our control. And yet they enter and they come into our frame of reference and they fracture us a little bit. I can talk all day long about my emotions about this external event, but what I don't do is dive beneath my veneer and go, where is this actually affecting me? And so I pray, I meditate, I exercise, I eat fairly well most of the time. I spend time talking to my friends. My life feels like it gets better and better, and then this stuff happens. Circumstances beyond my control. I'm an inactive participant, and yet I'm fracturing somewhere inside, and it's beginning to show on the outside. So I have to look at that. Everything, and I believe we all believe this to some reason, even though we know it's not true, everything revolves around us. Everything revolves around me. Everything revolves around you and you and you, because these are our lives. And so we're all on our own snow globes, right? And something can come along and shake it or bump us, and what's happening inside the globe happens. So I had to really think, and as it came to me as I was dealing with my current drama, that it was the same issue, maybe not the same circumstances, but it was the same issues. Something was touching a fear deep within me. Different people, yet they were similar to others from my past. Same behaviors, touching the same fears within me. I was the common link within everything that was happening around me, because it was my world revolving around me, so I'm the common link. So I had to think, what was my button? What's the button that's getting pushed, that's fracturing, that's making this energy charge fracture my outer world? What is that? And even though it was unexpected, boy, they sure got pushed. And this is what I've decided. My story, no matter what, always revolves around these same issues. It doesn't matter how spiritually fit I am. It doesn't matter. These are my issues. And we all have our issues. If we dig deep enough and we know what they are, we can recognize them more quickly. Hi.
Better late than never.
And when I'm... Is that a straight?
Bandit, this is his neighborhood. He lives right up the street. His name's Bandit, so we welcome him.
Bandit seems happy.
Very friendly.
So when I dig beneath the exterior, I find a similar theme. And for me, what revolves around me in my fears, and I think I've talked about this with you before, is the fear of getting older, And, I'm 61 and that will continue for a long time. I can tell my students that I'm middle-aged and that I'll be teaching when I'm 110, and they're like, you're so old already, And I'm like, you wait. You just wait. I feel lonely and unlikable. Like, I feel like my friends don't like me as much as I would like them to like me. And I'm concerned about being poor. I'm a teacher, and I worked in nonprofit for a very long time. I don't have the largest retirement waiting for me in a few years. And I know that I've always been cared for, but these are my fears because this is how I was raised, right? And when I am faced with the unexpected and what I perceive to be opposition, I can be pretty sure that one of my trinity are hanging out in the background, right? I'm unlikable, I'm poor, and I'm old. And so they're hanging out in there. So what is your theme? Are you a victim or a martyr? Do you get fearful and discounting or boisterous and overly confident? And why? What is hiding just beneath the veneer when a fracture happens in your world? I've also decided that buttons have to get pushed and to some extent in order for us to have that energy charge that creates a motivation for change. Or we get spiritually complacent. I believe that is true. And others have said that to me. When I rest on my laurels or I fall into that spiritual energy, the energy or that charge that we experience and subdue, that we push down, continues to build as it looks for release, because that's our script. It follows the path in our neural pathways of least resistance. And so it will express itself at some point and in some way. And that button might be pushed harder. It might become a big red button that people just can't resist poking, because that happens too. But avoidance of the underlying issues and the maintenance of a calm spiritual exterior does not enhance our progress. It doesn't at all. And what enhances our progress is knowing who we are and then sharing the truth about our progress to becoming better people. By being authentic in our humanness, in our shortcomings as well as our successes, is truly moving in grace. That's when we move in grace. In my opinion, no one emerges from this journey of transformation without having weathered a storm or two, without having a fracture or a hole poked into our armor, without having our snow globe shook up just a bit. No one emerges from this journey of transformation unscathed. Even if puppies run through the sanctuary. So this is the nature we've been gifted with, and it cannot be otherwise, because it's too late to turn back. And once we've gone out on the limb or we've put our toe in the water, right, we're already so far from that home that we're comfortable in. And so it's time to embrace our defects, embrace your faults, embrace your fears, recognize them, and keep moving on. Just keep moving on. And I want to change my schematic. I want to change how things are wired in my brain. And I believe we do that. And I believe we can change our scripts. I do. But we rely on them, and that drama is what drives us to act from the old scripts. And so I don't want to rely on drama for motivation and growth, right? I want to dig deep and know what it is before it comes at me in form of a wild dog or a student or a vice president with a piece of paper or a car kind of barreling down my way. I've been reading Rasha, and I think I've mentioned her. She's an American mystic who lives in India. And in her book called Oneness, she says, "It will serve you well to adopt a perspective that allows the unprecedented to become the norm. And similar to what Ernest Holmes says, but she says, let it become the norm, right? Because if we recognize that, things happen to us in our life and around us, then we can recognize the emotions that come with it. Every day, every moment, see the situation as one that is new and different. Direct your attention to the quality of the energy and not the situation itself. And this is a good thing to remember, but it can be a challenge to enact. And I invite you to accept that challenge. Let these things happen in your life. Let go of your defenses. Trust that you will be loved and accepted for your defects of character as well as your spiritual fitness. Let's put down our swords and our shields and